A saxologist here on Saxophonist. Today I have a very special guest. This is the new year 2026, and Saxophonist is off to a great start. But this man right here is a legend. And I mean, you know, since his debut album for Lovers Only in 1990, 17 CDs later, and his latest one is Doing Me. He has worked with the likes of Norman Connors, Phyllis Hyman, Gene Carn, The Temptations, Michael Bolton, Angela Bofield, Will Downing, and countless others, though. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you Saxo Man extraordinaire, and the brother is cool as the other side of the pillow, Mr. Marion Meadows. Marion, how are you, brother?
Hey Dave, how you doing, man?
Oh, man, I'm doing wonderful, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh man, it's my pleasure, man. It was divine to happen, brother, because I've been trying to get you on here for a while, and I
Yeah,
was
I know.
persistent.
Yes, you were. You were. But I told you to be.
You told
So
me to, though. You told me, so I said I don't want to be a pest, but you told me to check
no,
in with you, so I did.
I'm the bird. You got to put the salt on the tail so you can get him to stop flying around.
That's all right,
Uh,
man. That's a beautiful thing, brother. But first of all, I just want to give you your flowers, man, because you've had an amazing career and it's still going, man. And you're one of the baddest cats out there, brother. I mean, your sound is so recognizable, man. You know.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, I've been blessed and certainly I tried to keep my eye on what was necessary for me to have a career that involved legacy, that would eventually have a legacy content to it. And a lot of my colleagues and I will always talk about that. What's important now as we get into our later part of our careers is that we make sure pay attention that we have the music of our legacy as opposed to something that's trickery, and what's slick and what's happening now. Because we know from our generation that those songs are the ones that stand the test of time. So you want to make sure you got a couple of those in the can.
Yeah, yes, 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 man. So, Mary, so let's go back to Memories Lane, man. When did you first start getting interested in music, and what was your first instrument?
Well, when I was younger, in grade school, we had the luxury in those days of having bands in elementary school. So, and they would hand out the recorders. Most classes would, as part of the cultural content, would have, art. And then some schools would they hand out recorders and see which kids had musical aptitude, And my teacher, it was, Jesus, I was 8 years old when she passed them out in the class, and I started playing the recorder, and she was kind of amazed that I could play it the way I could play it, And she goes, "Well, you play that really well. I'm going to send you down to the band teacher." And I said, "Oh, okay." Yeah. So she sent me right down, and the band teacher said, asked me what I'd like to play. And I tell the story and over and over again, but I said I wanted to play saxophone like most of us would want to. And he goes, "Oh man, everybody wants to play the sax." And I goes, "What do you got?" He says, "Clarinets." I go, "Oh no, no, no." I said, "I can't play clarinet." I said, "The case is too small. I can't even walk home from school with that little thing." But anyway, that's what I ended up playing. And I'm thankful that I started on clarinet because saxophonists who know, and when you usually if you get to music school, you got to take clarinet class anyway, and that's a dog going from saxophone to clarinet. Clarinet to saxophone, as you well know, it's not as bad a transition, but
Right.
the other way, saxophone to clarinet. So I'm glad I took the steps of learning clarinet and then saxophone. Of course, then you have the flute and all the reeds as well. But I was never really not like Najee and Nelson Rangel. Those guys are the flute players.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I've had to double on flute in big bands. So, because in those days, you were trained enough to play all of those reed instruments. But for me, if I didn't excel on it, for me, that was my thing. I had to have a voice on those instruments, which is really why I never really became an alto player. Although I recorded with alto and on alto, I should say. Um, I play alto and I sound like a tenor player, but I was a tenor player in the beginning after clarinet. So, and then soprano kind of came along by nature of me being a clarinetist. That embouchure was very familiar to me. And as soon as I got my hands on a soprano, that was it. I was done. That was my voice, you know. But in the early days, you know, in elementary school, it was probably in those days. I'm not so sure they even have bands like that in elementary schools anymore at that early age, where you would get an instrument and you private lessons. And so they prepared us really well to go into the next thing, which would be middle school, which we call junior high school. And then I continued to play clarinet in middle school. And it wasn't until I got to high school that I even got a saxophone. So I was a clarinet player
Okay.
all that time.
So who were some of your influences on clarinet? Did you listen to Eddie Daniels or any of those guys back then?
Well, Eddie Daniels was actually a teacher of mine later in
Oh,
life,
oh yeah.
when I lived, in New York. But when I was younger, of course, I listened to a lot of Benny Goodman and Johnny Hartman. From Duke's band, Johnny Hodges, I mean. So
Okay.
Johnny Hodges was probably one of the first clarinetists I heard in Duke Ellington's band because my father was a big Duke Ellington fan, had a lot of his records. And then I heard that clarinet. Benny Bogart also was a great clarinetist from that band as well. But Benny Goodman actually was I mean, he wasn't from there, but he lived in Connecticut. So when I was a child, I actually got a chance to meet Benny Goodman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I was just a little kid, but my band teacher was a friend of Benny Goodman. So I got a chance to meet him, Lionel Hampton, and Gene Krupa, when I was younger. So that was three-quarters of the Benny Goodman quartet. But yeah, so those influences, those are some pretty powerful guys at the time. And then there was Artie Shaw. He was a great clarinetist as well. But I'm going to say my biggest influence was probably Benny in the sense that Benny was, and also Johnny Hodges. Johnny Hodges really sang, and of course Benny did as well. But
Yeah.
Benny had kind of like he had kind of a classical approach. And for me, it's always been kind of like a foot in the door of something classical in nature, but jazz by virtue of what comes out of the horn.
Right.
That's always been my thing, tone and a sweet sound. I've never been, although I went through a very avant-garde stage out of Berkeley, my sound was always more reminiscent of a player of a smoother sound. I was never really like a screaming rock kind of saxophone player. It's never been my style. It's always been on a different. I would say I called it cool side, not smooth, because smooth that was a title somebody else gave it.
Yeah.
That was, but we were all kind of like the Miles Davis, the cool jazz, and of course, then we were listening to all of these artists now that were as we were growing up, who were now more contemporary artists, so they were crossing over, and Herbie Hancock was crossing over into electric piano, and all of these artists were now starting to cross over. So now you would hear like a Herbie Mann, and eventually like a Grover Washington, a John Clemmer, and these guys who were playing, and also a great saxophone player that used to play with Lonnie Liston, and Hubbard was his name. Remember the guy? His name was like Ron Hubbard or something. Great saxophone player that used to play with Lonnie Liston Smith.
I
And
remember Lonnie
I
Liston. I
heard,
can't remember him though, but I remember Lonnie Liston, man. Yeah.
yeah. And he used, whose band he used to play in? He used to play in John Lucian's
Oh, is
band.
that right?
Great sopranos. Yeah, he was a great soprano saxophone player. But I grew up in and around New York City, so there was great players in New York City. Of course, there was the giants like Michael Brecker and David Sanborn, but there were many players in New York City uh, on that level of players. So that when you went into New York in those days, you couldn't go in there playing around. It wasn't like you went in there to play some. some smooth jazz or something. That didn't even exist in those days. You had to go in town and blow. You had to play, you
Yeah.
know. They tell you to go home, you know. And this is after all going to Berkeley, you know. This is after all the studying that you can do. They tell you, man, throw that out the door. Can you play? When you get on stage, can you blow? And they just tell you to go home. But they would tell you to come back if they felt like you really wanted to do this because to be a musician, you had to jump both feet in, you know. And in those days and in these days as well. It's a little more difficult now for the younger players because the pay scale doesn't really meet up to the lifestyle of what you need to get paid to make a living playing music. Of course, in our day, you could make we
Right.
had clubs, we had radio stations, we could make records, and there was several outlets for being able to monetize, you know, being a musician. But in the meantime, we had such a great platform by which we could go into New York City, hear some of the greatest players, and occasionally be invited up to come and play. And you show up long enough, eventually they're going to tell you, like, you're going to take the horn out, or you're just going to sit there and just sit there in the audience and listen. So they knew what you were there for. And for me, that was probably the greatest gift coming up during our generation, is that we had so many people giving at the same time they would criticize you in a very helpful way, you know, in a very so that you know you everybody patting you on the back. That's not good, you know.
Right. Right. Right.
Sometimes somebody got to tell you that's not happening, you know. Take your ass home and do some more practicing. And so those are all good things. Constructive criticism was something, and that made us a little tougher as musicians when we were growing up in and around New York. And I'm sure, you know, any city that you came from at that time would always have great players coming into the metropolis where the players were, you know, and that's how you did. That was the litmus test, right then and there. And part of that, you know, chronology of me coming from, and then, you know, getting accepted to go to Berklee School of Music, and getting to Berklee, and man, that was in itself a revelation because I got there and I'm going like, God, I didn't even know young kids could play like this. You know, you kids from all over the world. You had
Yeah.
Japanese virtuosos and people from all over the world, you know. And these young players were there to play. Some of them were there to be education majors, but most of the kids that came to Berklee came to play. So when you step through the doors at Berklee, no matter what period and every time, including now, there's players that come through there, and that would wake you up if you felt as though there's something you needed to know to step up your game. You usually realize that as soon as you step through the doors of Berklee and heard the kids playing in the practice room. So, but even after that, you go to New York, they tell you your ass to go home. They said go. but but that was the whole thing. The guys that didn't come back were not going to be the guys who were going to be the players. That was the point, you know, because everybody's not going to be a trumpet player, a saxophone player, and be. But that's where, you know, later on, while I was at Berklee, I got a chance to meet Connors. And Norman Connors was like, one day, you know, we'll meet up somewhere. Part of that process was as I was going to the city, I was also, you know, meeting friends down in Philadelphia. So I started that corridor, Boston, between Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, was rich in culture and a great time to be there, you know, during the 80s and the 90s.
So let me ask you, Marion, when did you feel like you had what it took to be a professional musician?
Well, you know, I was only going by what I could play and recite back, and in comparison to, like I say, other players. So part of that was we were being trained to also be professional musicians, which is when you get up on the bandstand, you're given a job, and that job is to play this music. And in many cases, you were given the music to read or whatever. Didn't mean you were going to be a solo performer, but you were a professional musician. So you were being called to do, in those days, you were either called to do you know, maybe a big band gig, a society wedding gig, you know, if you were a reader, or you were doing like disco. I was in a disco band with, you know, Thelonious Monk, T. Monk Jr. And
Okay.
it was incredible. It had Jimmy Malin and they had John Trapeo on guitar in this band. I mean, it was a killing band.
Yeah.
You know, like singers like Lisa Fisher would be in bands like so they would have these disco bands because there were no tracks in those days. So there would always be like a brother on drums and an Italian guitar player, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
a Puerto Rican conga player, you know, and background singers. And it in New York City, the disco bands, they worked all the time. They did weddings, they did shows, but they were all live. So if you had a horn section, you had to have horns.
Yeah,
You had a couple saxophones, a trumpet, trombone. You had to have two or three background singers. So it was always a huge band. And when you showed up, not everybody was a reader. You didn't have to be. I mean, depending on what kind of gig you got. If you were going to get a big band gig, you can't get that if you didn't read. But if you were a reader, then you would get those kinds of gigs. But if you were just a great player, you might get like a disco gig or a jazz gig or something. You know what I mean?
right,
So every musician, not everybody was a sight reader, but some musicians were prodigious and they could play. A lot of guys came out of the church. They weren't well trained, but that's not the point. The point is their ear was so good they
right.
could play anything. So a lot of us came up with just playing and then became an integral part of the music scene in whatever city we were coming from. So I always say that nowadays, when especially the young guys who play in the church, maybe they started playing by ear. But I always encourage them get on the internet now because now you have a tool by which it could show you those chords that you may not know you're playing. What the names of those chords are, you can learn those from YouTube now. You could teach yourself chord changes right on the internet without even ever having to hire a private teacher, you know.
Yeah,
But the sight reading part is a whole nother animal. That's an entirely different. So you could get gigs doing that as well.
sorry
And
about
then
that. Yeah,
mhm. So for me, I was working. I was privileged enough to get called. Finally, Norman Connors and I reconnected. He was playing with Pharoah Sanders at the time, and then he had put out "You're My Starship" with Michael Henderson and "Betcha by Golly Wow" with Phyllis Hyman. Eventually, he hired me to be in the band. I wrote some music for Norman Connors. I had a day job at the time, and I was trying to get my master's degree. I was doing all these things all at once, and then I got that phone call. And that phone call was the one that took me on the road. And that was it. That was the beginning of my musical career. And I traveled around the world with Norman Connors and Phyllis Hyman and, Michael Henderson and Billy Paul. It was amazing, you know. But then Najee, who lived in New York City, I lived in Connecticut, came out with a record on Hush Productions. Excuse me. And he came up to Connecticut, stole my guitar player. I got mad, man, because his record was so good. It was pretty amazing. And he was produced by Ronnie Song, who's a very dear friend of mine now. Excuse me. Yeah. And Ronnie Song, he and I, excuse me, sorry. He and I've done quite a few songs, records together. But man, this is a record, and Najee had done Tokyo Blue, and he had done the record, the remake of Vanessa. No, no, he did Whitney Houston's song. I forget the name of it, but man, it was a big hit, and his record went gold. I got mad. I said I got to do a record, and so that's when I decided I was going to be. I needed to be a solo artist. I said because I know that he and I have kind of come up doing the same thing, grooming ourselves to maybe get to a place where we could be solo artists. And he had already done it, and he had gone to New England Conservatory, and he was a well-trained musician. And so I said, "Well, isn't that what I did?" I said, "So it's just time for me." So I quit my job at Norman Connors, and I took a day job working at a factory, and started recording my record at night. And it took me one whole year to do it. And after that year, my tape was done. I was living in Japan for a few months, and I got a call from RCA Records, and that was the beginning. They told me to come on back to New York because they'd like to sign me to a recording contract. So that was the way it happened.
man, that's amazing, man. So the Norman Connor years, man, that was so much talent, man, in that group with Gene Carn and Phyllis and all that. What were the rehearsals like, man?
It was just amazing. It was probably effortless in the sense that these were all such professional artists, including Michael Henderson played the bass, played everything. He was
Right,
playing with Miles Davis when he was only like 15 or
right,
something. People don't realize that. So they all could sing. I mean, all these people, I think in those days, everybody could sing and dance and act, and
right.
everybody was a multi-talented person. Like if you were to see, if you go back and look at all the old sitcom shows. And it didn't matter if it was a black actor or white actor, they all could sing and dance and act. That was just a part of the thing. If you come to New York in those days and went to Broadway, you had to be able to tap dance. That was one of the prerequisites to get on Broadway. Even if you went in a show that didn't have tap dancing, when you showed up on Broadway in New York City, everybody had to tap dance. You had to be able to tap, to get a gig on Broadway, or at least you had to be able to be a dancer. So you had to sing, you had to act, you had to dance, and so I think people were just so talented. Gene Carn was an amazing, amazing talent. I eventually started working with Andrew Bofill and another queen of and filled with so much talent. And of course, Michael Henderson and Billy Paul was a part of that band. We had Ada Dyer, Invitation, and Eleanor Mills, This Is Your Life. So Norman was onto something early in the game, the fusion between jazz and R&B, as was Dexter Wansel. And actually, people don't realize those records came out before the Quincy Jones merger with the whole Michael Jackson thing. Quincy Jones had Walking in Space, which was a little more contemporary, but the actual R&B records fusing R&B and jazz, those actually kind of happened with Norman Connors and TSOP and Dexter Wansel. Those guys were kind of doing that more in the 80s, if you remember.
Yeah.
So it was great to be a part of that alumni, and certainly a great springboard. I always credit Norman as being really the person that discovered me, because he gave me a shot. He really did.
Man, it's funny that you had mentioned John Clemmer. You was talking about the guys playing, and John Clemmer. I told him I was interviewing you. He said, tell him I said hello. He said, and ask him, did he play bebop coming up, and what was your thoughts about bebop?
Oh yeah. Well, you had to. When we were coming up, you had to bop.
Yeah,
There were gonna be two things that were gonna happen growing up especially, let's say for instance, you're a saxophone player, and you're a saxophone player, you're a horn player, and you're going to at some point make a decision because they're going to expect you to play straight ahead jazz at some point. Now, bebopping in the sense of like Charlie Parker, Charles McPherson, you know, Tony Watson, those kind of guys. Now, then there was cool. So then there's like bebop, Dizzy Gillespie style of bebopping, and then there's a more cool side of Miles Davis kind. So Miles Davis not really bopping, but he's straight ahead. He's not really he's not bebop,
right.
that wasn't his style. You know, it wasn't even really train style. Train style was more avant-garde over changes, But the guys who were bopping the 2 5, they were, so when you listen to, I mean, when these guys, I think Gil Noble interviewed Dizzy Gillespie, and he was talking about his days hanging out with Thelonious Monk, and they were coming up with, this is music people don't realize it didn't even exist before on the planet. So this is music that they were turning the chords inside out and going backwards, and they're coming up with dominant six, all this stuff. And Gil Noble asked Diz Gillespie, so when you guys met Charlie Parker, was he already bopping too? And Diz Gillespie said, he must have been, because they didn't hang out together before that.
Right, right.
These guys were coming from all over America. I mean, so you would have these guys were geniuses. These were mathematical geniuses. People. This is the part that I get a little passionate about. That we didn't embrace this part of our culture in America because you're talking about people in the same light as inventors, who made a significant change. Let's say an invention that changed our lives forever. Well, these are people who changed our lives musically because they were experimenters and they were inventors and they
Yes.
were geniuses. They could see inside the chord, take the chord apart, go inside out. So what was we knew as major chords and I mean, they took minor chords and turned them into diminished chords, and they turned them into, inside out. So what used to be ba 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 then became that never existed before. It was, ba ba be ba be ba ba be ba ba or the bluesy da da da. But then it was ba 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 that's that's way whole nother
Yeah.
that's a whole other train ride that and then these guys when they started hearing the other musicians going like who are these cats, what is this they're creating, because they're taking chords and they're taking rhythms and mathematically rearranging them in a style of music that no one had ever heard before, thus the name bebop. So when you're coming up after post guys like Charlie Parker and many other guys like Sonny Chris, people had never heard of, uh, Sonny Stitt, Dexter Gordon, and these kind of guys, then you would have to be playing some of that music. Otherwise, you wouldn't even get called for a gig. Now, if you decided that you were going to dedicate yourself to bebop, that was the same as dedicating yourself to classical music, because now you want to become known as a bebop player. So you have to study that. You can play, some classical players are trained to play classical music, but they can't go on stages and play classical music with classical players.
Right.
You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Not classical soloists. When you're a solo classical pianist from somewhere in the world, you're the top of your game. And you studied and studied and studied and studied, and that's what you do. Bebop players are no different. They study their whole lifetime to be able to play that fast, those changes, think that fast. It's not something you play around with, and I do it every now and then. So to say, am I a bebop player? I play around with bebop like most jazz musicians, except there are guys who play bebop,
Right.
and so there's like there's whoever your favorite classical pianist is or classical violinist who's at the top of the game, those are the people who you anoint as being the people who play that kind of music. And even I mean, even though Miles could have been a bebop guy, he chose a different road because the cool jazz was something that was also very necessary because the linear part of jazz needed to be also be explored. And bebop, you're a lot of changes, and you'll hear it now on. You'll go on YouTube, you'll see great players, great saxophone players, young guys who are going, they're going, ba 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 dum, be ba dum, boo, ba dum, and they're playing all the changes, they're killing it, they're killing it. But you know what? Some other guys have been at that,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they're playing it well. Don't get me wrong. That's not
Yeah.
what I'm saying.
Right. Right.
What I'm saying is for me, I heard a kind of a neoclassical linear style of jazz that called me, you know. So I wanted to spend time exploring that so that I could, well, because Grover had said to me, he used to call me Young Meadows. He said, Young Meadows, you already have a sound. And, many of us in those days would try to emulate Grover, you
Right.
know. So we would do Grover's licks and bends and all that kind of stuff. We couldn't help it because it was fantastic. And John Clemmer as well. So, um, but he told me, he says, you have a sound. So now start to explore that sound. And he goes, and if you stay in that lane, he goes, because here's the thing about music. You're going to be a musician. There's always going to be somebody that you think is, there's going to be a guy that you feel as though, well, he's a greater player than me.
Right.
But if you go through life chasing the idea that there's a greater player or kind of condescending to another player because you feel as though you're a better player, then you're never going to be a real musician in the sense of what it's all about. Your anointing is that you were even able to do this for a living, period. That's the point.
Yes.
So if you can find a place in all the whole in this entire world of musicians who want to be musicians, who are musicians, and those who will never be professional musicians, then you're truly, truly lucky to be a part of that lottery. So that's what I decided to do. That I would go in search of what would be then my sound, and I've kind of tried to stay true to that Dave, over the years, I've tried to stay true to that and kind of keep that consistency. And, that's what I know.
I tell you what,
Yeah.
man, hey, it works, brother. And another thing, I've seen you in concert several times. We actually met at Spagattini not too long ago, right?
Yeah.
Last
Oh,
month.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So, but I
Yeah.
can tell you, man, like the youngsters say, your drip. You know what the drip is, your gear. Man, your
Yeah. Yeah.
drip is fresh, bro, and your stage presence, man. I mean, I just like so how cool you are out there, man. You come out there like this is what I feel when I see you. I'm a bad mother. I got this. I do this. This is me, and I'm going to give you the best of me. And I got this. This is what I do.
It's all I know how to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When just from just from being on stage, with those artists that we previously mentioned, they certainly set the trend. People showed up on stage, they would dress well. They didn't come out sloppy.
Right.
Presentation was always a part of the game, and self-confidence, because no one wants to see you on stage looking like you don't really know what you're doing, or you're not comfortable in the dress that you have on. And I always say that whatever you wear, that's why Miles would wear all this crazy stuff. But you know what? Nobody ever said anything.
Yeah.
They just said that's
Yeah.
just Miles Davis.
That was him.
We didn't expect anything less, right? We,
Yeah. Right. Right.
so and but yeah, that's something that you learn also, that you take into your performances, that there's a pride to it and the self-confidence, so that you know people don't know that sometimes, like for me, before I'm getting ready to play, I got to be like real quiet. I got to, I get kind of, it's not so much that I've got nervous. I want to make sure that my show is in my head, that when I get out there, I'm as professional as I can be. And so that that that's just one of the things you see and you admire from your other colleagues as well. Because I see that with my other guys that do what we do. That's why those guys are on that level.
Right. Right.
When I see when I see a guy like a Nelson Rangel come out and play, I know he has his confidence as a player. You know, and I see that with all the guys. Like a Eric Marienthal and Everett Harp. And Najee and guys like Walter Beasley and Boney James and those guys. They
Right.
when they show up, they're professional, and they come on stage and they're professional. And if you don't, if you know that you can't take away from that, then you've done your work, and your due diligence to make sure that your show has a presentation, to it.
So when did you start? Are you using a pedal now? Sometime?
I've always had some kind of little effect pedal, because I
Was that
always
right?
like to control my own reverbs and stuff. I've always, that's always, because we talk about John Clement. John used
Yeah.
to have the
The
Echo
Echoplex.
Flex thing. He
Yeah.
probably had the Echoplex in the
Yeah.
day with the
Exactly.
tape.
Exactly. Right.
And
Right.
I
Right.
couldn't wait to get one of those things. I never did end up getting one. I
Oh, you
borrowed one
did?
from my friend. But man, I love that Echoplex thing. And eventually the Boss pedals came along, and so you could get a little echo and a little reverb and stuff. But yeah, that's kind of like reminiscent of my sound.
I
Kind of
like
goes.
it, man. Because when I was instructed, I said, oh no, I said, no, no. I said, okay. I saw you doing. I said, okay. But you got a little bit of Iwi sound in there, a little bit,
Yeah,
So you put it,
get a little something,
yeah,
something, something.
you got a
I
little
see you got,
Iwi.
like, what is that, Kyle Worth in the back of you? What is that, Kyle
You
Worth
already
horn?
know it, man. That's it. That's the shadow.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a beautiful horn back
Thank you,
there,
man.
man.
And I got the cannonball in there, my alto though. So since you mentioned horns, man, let's talk about setups, man. What are you playing these days, man?
Well, I'm still, I'm going to NAM this year, and I'm gonna, I'm still with Cannonball. I've been playing Yanagasawa, back to Yanagasawa. I played Yanagasawa for many years, and the Silverhorn, which they now come called the WO30, I think
Okay.
now, which used to be the 9930, or
Right.
the WO3, or whatever they call it now. So I'd like that Silverhorn. It's just got a sound just a little brighter enough, but not too much. And the other one is a little darker, the O2. But either of those Yannick Gonzalez are beautiful horns.
Yeah, yeah,
I had that, and of course the Cannonballs also beautiful sopranos.
right.
So I don't have any problem playing any of those. But I play Theo Lonnie mouthpieces, hard rubber, and
Okay.
and I and I do the Durga on my tenor sax as well, the hard rubber one. But lately I've been doing the metal Durga, which I think is the Durga. But they're all Theo Lonnie.
Right, right, right. The Durga
So
5, the latest one, Durga 5.
I always I don't I usually have about a seven, you
Okay.
know.
No, no, I
So
mean the
yeah.
model, the Durga, they got
Oh, the
Durga
Durga I have is
5,
the is the old one. I got like the I'm still
3.
playing on like the three.
Yeah, they have
Yeah.
a 3, a 4, and a 5,
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah.
I have a four, but I played it for a while, but that three is still
Yeah.
holy grail for me. So when I see Theo this weekend, I'm gonna say, dude, you gotta I know you got some of them old ones back in the shop. Send me one of them old ones that you got back there that you can't sell anymore,
What
you
kind
know,
of
because
liquors
I
you
like
what kind of liquors you using on that?
I still I hope it don't break. I got an old Oleg, you know, one
Okay,
of the
yeah.
chain ones,
Right,
chain
right.
link.
I thought I saw that
So
when you were playing. It looked like one of those, yeah.
yeah, now I think they said that they're still making them. The guy that used to work with Oleg is still making those. I know Michael Linkton knows. I got to call Michael because they were making his mouthpiece when Oleg passed away. So I
Okay.
know Michael. I'm sure I'm gonna, you know, of course, Michael. You gonna be at the NAMM show?
Yeah,
Are
I'll
you
be
going
there.
to the
Yeah.
show?
What
Okay,
day you
cool.
gonna be there?
I'll be there. I'm getting in Thursday night, so I'll be there Friday and Saturday,
Okay.
and
I'll see.
Sunday I'm gonna take
Well,
off.
I hope to see you there, man, because I'll be there.
Oh, you'll
Because
definitely see me. I'll be
yeah.
hanging around Cannonball. I gotta go over and make up because they I made the mistake of putting a promotional, you know, one of my things for the Christmas thing with the Yannicka. I was like, oh Jesus, I could have at least taken a picture with the Cannonball. Then they come to me and say, "You playing another horn?" I go, "No, no, no." My voice went all up high,
What was that?
and
Tavis?
so
Tavis called
tell me,
you?
oh no, no. When I get back, I gotta hold my head down. I swear to God. When I go to the booth this year, I gotta hold my head down. I can't
That's
even look
it.
up. They're gonna look at me like, you know, they're gonna probably slap me upside the head.
You
But
know, that's my
they're
favorite
such good
booth,
people.
Mary. That's my favorite booth, Cannonball,
Oh, they're the
man.
greatest people. They're beautiful people.
They are, man. You
I
know,
gotta beg for another tenor. I need a new tenor.
they
I could get on my knees and beg.
get
And I
that
want to
30th,
clarinet,
that
huh?
30th anniversary, man. You see that?
I haven't seen it yet. Is it the one that's that color, that dark color thing,
Yeah,
that purple looking thing?
yeah, yeah.
They make that in tenor also?
I think I saw him demoing it the other day on
But that was an
Facebook.
alto. He wasn't it an alto he
No,
was
that was a
playing on?
tenor. I saw him with a tenor. Oh,
Okay,
no, no, no. I'm
okay.
sorry. The tenor was the Black Ruby. They redoing the
Black
Black Ruby again.
they are.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
got that one.
I gotta play because you know, usually when those horns are anodized like that, that's not necessarily my favorite. I just kind of like more the vintage horns
Oh, do you?
style. Yeah, I mean for me, you know,
Okay.
I'm still recording on my old Mark Six, you know, but I like to have a newer horn because you know just to have. But for tone, I can in the studio, I can't beat my old Mark Six. You can't beat it. I got a good one. Not all of them were great, but I got a great one. Yeah, I have a great one for recording, but I won't take it out on the road. And so this next coming year, I want to start taking a tenor out more and more, some tenor sax, you know.
So since you know when I first heard you actually on Norman Connors, you were actually playing tenor.
I probably was.
Yeah, you were
Yeah.
playing tenor on there. Yeah,
Yeah, because we
yeah,
do a lot of that Naima and all that stuff,
yeah,
you know, be Bobby, you know,
yeah.
and Mr. C and so you man, them guys used to make us play.
I
They made us
know.
they call us the young bucks back then, and they make us play hard, and then you do like three, four sets, and back in them days, you know, they didn't play around.
Hey man,
But it was great.
I want to ask you about a good friend of yours, and he's no longer with us now though. But I wanted to just ask you about Wayman Tisdale.
Wayman, yeah, yeah,
How was your relationship with
that was
him?
very special. I had a wonderful relationship with Wayman Tisdale, and probably because of him, because he would reach out to people. You know, I mean, Wayman Tisdale was a famous basketball player. In a million years, other than to meet him on a gig somewhere, was I ever going to meet Wayman Tisdale? But I happened to live in Phoenix, and he was playing for the Phoenix Suns. And I get a phone call one day, and he goes, "It's Wayman Tisdale." And I say, "Hey, Wayman." He goes, "You know, I live right down in Paradise Valley." And I go, "Well, I live in Paradise Valley." And then he says, "Well, come on over." And that's how he and I and we had passed each other in a couple of shows because he was just starting to get out and play. He was doing recordings, but he wasn't on the scene yet. Couple shows in passing. And then I said, I bet this guy is gonna, I bet he's gonna retire from basketball and come over and start playing. You know, we always call him, that's not fair. You're like the millionaire basketball player, you know, honing in on our jazz scene. Everybody loved Wayman. He was bigger than life in many ways, and you would be hard pressed to find a human being like that guy. He was just an amazing, amazing person. He was a great father, great husband. He was what a family man he was, and he was still playing basketball at the time that he and I were still recording together. And I'd be over his house. 4 o'clock in the morning. I said, "Don't you have a game tomorrow?" He goes, "Ah, don't worry about that." Like this got to be at 5 o'clock. You got to go play a game, an NBA game. But that was the guy. He said he played bass before he played basketball.
Is that
That's what
right?
he told me. Yeah, he said he played bass in the church before he played basketball. And because he was so tall, he did play a little basketball, but now he's getting recruited
Right.
for high school and college, and then ended up being first round draft pick coming into the league. So he
Yeah.
was a bad dude. He was a bad dude.
Yeah, man.
Had a great career. So it was very sad when we lost Wayman. Wayman Tisdale. If I were to say who else people would know as far as a legend in two different genres, he's the name that comes to mind. And they said his funeral was so large they actually had to rent out the whole like Oklahoma stadium to get all the people in that came to his funeral.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, they had it was packed. It was like thousands of 20, 30,000 people.
Right.
But that's the kind of guy he was. And it's just a testimony to who he was. But I was happy to call him a friend. And we
Yeah.
did quite a few recordings together. He's on a couple of my albums, and I'm on some of his stuff as well.
While doing my research and stuff, I ran across something today. I said, I didn't know you played with Bob Berg and Gerald Albright on that "Funky for Jamaica." I didn't even know about that song, man.
For Bob Baldwin?
Bob Baldwin, I meant, yeah, Bob
Yeah.
Baldwin, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Bob and I go back many years. He and I
Okay,
have done probably more recordings together than maybe anyone, except for maybe Ronnie Song. But Bob and I, we've done so many recordings together. But he was a New York guy too. He was
okay,
another one of the New Yorkers.
yeah.
We did records with Pieces of a Dream, and we had Porter Carroll from Atlantic Star. I mean, that was where my friends Atlantic Star, and Atlantic Star was a jazz band when they were growing up.
Oh, is that right?
Then they added the singer, which was Sharon Bryant,
She was great.
and then yeah, and then they became superstars with all those great songs, those pop hits. As was Kool and the Gang, jazz band.
Right.
Earth, Wind and Fire, jazz band. Bar-Kays, jazz band. They were all jazz bands.
That's true, though. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, Earth, Wind and Fire was a pure jazz band with Andrew Woolfolk on saxophone. And so they started doing that ba da ba ba ba. They would never any distinct lyrics. They would just sing along with the songs. So Maurice would start doing that. But I saw them in Boston as a jazz band in a club that only held 110 people, and it was Earth, Wind, and Fire.
yeah,
And then they started doing the vocals like Kool and the Gang when they had their first big hits, and it was next thing you know, Kool and the Gang is the biggest pop band of all time.
yeah. They
But they
they
were a
were
jazz band.
awesome.
Yeah, they were a jazz band. The two brothers from New Jersey who were you remember the saxophone players, both the saxophone players, they were Muslim brothers. And I can't think of his name now. It escapes me. He was the tenor player. He was a great tenor player, that guy.
Yeah.
And the alto player was a monster in Kool and the Gang.
Oh yeah,
Monster.
yeah, yeah. They had a nice horn section, man. They did.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so those guys and I saw that was another influence for me when I saw Kool and the Gang in Stamford, Connecticut when I was young. And they played in Stamford, Connecticut, and they were more of a jazz band than they didn't have any of those hits that they had celebrate none of that
Right,
stuff.
right.
They had the wild and the peaceful kind of thing. Remember that song? The
Yeah,
something in the wild. that was the biggest hit they had at the time. At that time, was that hit, and then those other songs came after
Did
with
Grover help
J.T.
them out?
Taylor.
Did Grover help them out, get them
He
started?
may have. I don't know. He
Yeah,
may have.
Pieces of
He
a
may
Dream.
have.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's Pieces of a Dream, but I mean with Cool in the Gang. I
Oh,
mean,
Cooling
yeah, but
Gang. Right,
Pieces
right.
of a Dream. But Pieces Grover discovered
Yeah, right, right.
James and Curtis and Cedric. He discovered them, and they were all prodigies. Those young guys.
Yeah,
They were what 12, 13, 14, something like that. And I had already done an album, and next thing you know, they got a record with Grover Washington featured on their album, and they're
yeah,
like little teenagers. I mean, who did that? And here they are today. I remember, well, I can say it on the air, but I mean, there was a time, there was a little rough period for the, Pieces of Dream guys. And I just said, look, you guys have an institution. You guys can never mess this up,
yeah,
bro. You guys, of course, they look at you go see them now. They're just one of the most dynamic bands you can go
yeah,
see is Pieces
yeah.
of a Dream. Amazing, amazing.
Well, my friend, for you, I mean, you're pretty amazing yourself to be all of these. I mean, 17 albums as a leader, man. Let me ask you, your first record you heard on the radio. Do you remember the first time you heard your record on the radio?
I did. I was actually driving, and they played it on WRVR in New York City at that time. It was Russ. What was Russ? Russ. I forgot Russ's name, but he was the DJ for RVR back then, and that was when they were still playing John, David Sanborn,
Yeah,
you know, Larry Coryell, Steely Dan. All those records were being played. Uh, and then Najee, of course,
right.
was being played, and then you had George Howard. So you had George Howard, Noel Pointer,
Yeah,
Angie Bofill, all the GRP people, and then you had guys from Bob James's label, which was Tappan Z, and then you also had CTI Records. So that would be like Kudu, which would be like how Grover got called to sub for Hank Crawford on a Bob James recording, and they couldn't get Hank. Hank, something happened, and they said, "This is this guy Grover Washington," and they called him in, and the rest is history. Once Grover came in, they were like, "Who is this cat?" And Grover used to play with Charles Earland,
oh
doing
yeah, he did. I remember
that
the
organ.
organ
Yeah.
player. Yeah, yeah,
Oh man, so he was swinging hard, man,
yeah, yeah,
with Charles Earland. So if you came from a band like Charles Earland, because George Benson is one of my dear friends, and he came from Jack McDuff's band. And he
yes.
said that was the
Remember,
best gig you could have as a guitar player was being in one of the organ trio bands
right,
because it was always the organist was kicking the bass with the pedals. So it would just be a drummer and a guitar player or saxophone player and the organ player. But somebody was going to be the lead guy and it would be the guitar player usually. And he said he got fired from Jack McDuff and Jack McDuff hired Pat Martino.
yeah.
He said, I almost quit. Pat Martino was so good. George Benson, you can imagine George Benson, I almost quit playing guitar. I heard
Uh,
Pat Martino. He said, dang, I
that
heard
would
this
have been
cat playing.
a travesty for us.
George Benson wasn't going to stop playing. I said, George, get out of here.
You know, he kind of remind me of another guy that's no longer with us. George Benson is Nick Coleon. Did you know him?
Yeah, Nick was a dear friend of mine. As a matter of fact, his agent is now my agent because after Nick passed, I kind of moved over and kind of helped, fill that void for my agent Steve Butler. But Nick and I were dear, dear friends. We were close. It was that was a heartbreaker
Yeah,
to wake up, right there. I on a day or two after Christmas or New Year's, I forget what it was, and during the holiday season, and we had lost Ron Lawrence the day before.
right, right.
Guitarist Ron Lawrence, and the next day Nick passed away. Um, I had seen Nick during that season, and he didn't look well. I didn't know what was going on with him, but he just didn't look well to me.
Right.
Only to find out that he was going through something, and then he left us. But that was also one of those kind of guys, that
Yeah,
you bigger than life. He was a contributor to what we know as today's contemporary jazz scene. And that's the way I feel about it. Those are the guys who contributed. They
yeah,
made a difference. As much as I talk about Najee making me mad, I realized that was only because he was making me say to myself, if I'm gonna contribute this thing, I gotta get started right now, you
yeah.
know. You know, my girl and I were talking today about, when you're going to set out to do something, you got a timeline to
Yeah,
do this thing. If you sit around procrastinating, talking about it, and never do it, it ain't going to happen.
yeah, that's right.
You'll be 40 years old and you go, I didn't, then you're 50 years old, well, I'm gonna, no, you got to do it. You got to get in there and do it. It's got to put the work in. So I heard the work that he put in, and I said, "Ooh, it's not like I got to make a tape now.
Right.
I got to make a record
Yeah, yeah.
to compete with that." Because man, he was blowing his brains out, and it was very impressive. And I always tell him every time I see him. That's why I love him so much. I said because you made me a better player, and made me put my nose to the grindstone and get it done.
Yeah.
And he and I dear 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 close friends. Did you ever hear the record we did together called Celebration Road? He's playing flute on my record called Celebration Road. That's Najee on flute,
Okay.
and you
All right.
check it out. It's on the Soul Traveler record,
Okay.
and I believe it's the first cut on there. I think you would like it. It's
Oh yeah,
because
yeah.
I called him up and I said, hey man, won't you do this track? And I said, how much is it gonna cost me to get you on this track? He goes, and he hung up on me. He goes, why you gonna ask me something like that? As long as we've been knowing each other, that's how much love I have for that brother. And Gerald Albright, of course,
Oh,
he's another. I,
wow.
sometimes I get a little upset that guys like Kirk and Gerald. I'm not saying they get snubbed. What I'm saying is that these guys are the true icons
Right.
of the saxophones of our generation. Joel Albright's on Michael Jackson records. He's on like Beauty and the Beast. He's on movies, and Kirk Whalum and the greatest saxophone solo of all time.
Yeah.
I'll Always Love You, Whitney Houston. So these guys are the giants
Yeah.
of the living saxophone players.
Yeah. That's
So to
true.
me, they need to be the guys that get the just due, as far as I'm concerned. Sometimes I kind of see some other people being propped up as like these, but no, these guys are the guys, and they really are the guys, undeniably the guys, because of their body of work, the musicianship. I mean, these guys can bebop. Both these guys are boppers, came from hardcore bopping. So, to me, I'm blessed to be a part of this alumni and to be able to say that these guys are just simply my friends.
And you still getting the calls, man, after all these years, man, you know?
I hope so.
Yeah, you still getting the calls, man, and that's a testament, and I was talking to another artist not long ago, and I looked up the stats about where you guys are at. It says the chances of someone growing up to be a professional musician and to get a recording contract is 0.25%.
Wow.
0.25. You got a better chance being an actor, 2%.
Really? No
Yeah,
kidding.
but
I
you
believe
still
it.
there
Yeah.
though. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah. I
know.
mean, we did. We came up. We did come up at a time when we had true mentors, and we talked about Eddie Daniels. Eddie Daniels was a guy who took me under his wing, and he says, listen, if you're going to play, you got to have beautiful tone. You already have good tone. He goes, but I need you to have beautiful tone. When you record your horn, this is where people are going to hear you live on the stage. When you're home playing, your reed is bad. Nobody cares about that.
Right, right.
But when you're professionally stepping on the stage, you got to have the right reed, got to have the right tone, and when you're recording for real in your records, that's when it counts. You know. And he goes, in order to be able to call that up at will is the art of being a professional musician, and that was his motto. And he goes, and tone is probably for a horn player the most important. Not reading, not how many notes you play. What do you sound like? What is the sound of your horn in relation to the people listening to what you're playing? He said that's the most important thing. And that guy was a beast, or
Yeah.
still is.
Tone. You're right. Tone. Tone is all about. And I know this one of the saxophonist friends of mine said he met Eddie Harris, and he
Uh-huh.
said he asked me. He said Eddie, what does it take to become a great professional sax player? He said keep the horn in your mouth.
Yeah, keep the horn in
Keep
your
the
mouth.
horn in your mouth. In
Yeah,
other words,
right.
just practice all the time. That's what he said,
Keep working at it.
Yeah.
Another guy who was a mentor for me was Sonny Fortune. A lot of people don't know about Sonny Fortune. Sonny Fortune was the saxophone player. I first heard him play soprano sax with McCoy Tyner, and I said,
Okay.
"Oh, I want to do that." There's a song called Sahara, Ebony Queen.
Uh,
Oh man, you gotta go get that recording. It's
right.
Oh my God. And he plays. So that's the only time where you hear me playing with that kind of fire where I'm kind of gobbling and screaming because I got that from him. I'm gonna claim that right now that that's where I got that from was from Sonny Fortune. But those, I mean, my dad was a big fan of Sonny Chris, who was a big Parker kind of guy. He was Charlie Parker, but he was also little bit, he was a little bit before Charles McPherson and in between like a Sonny Stitt, because a lot of people don't realize Sonny Stitt sometimes played alto too, you
Okay.
know, and Cannonball Adderley, Cannonball was just a master, and he
Yeah.
was certainly a Charlie Parker. He played Charlie Parker inside out. But this you could check out the Sonny Stitt if you Sonny Chris if you don't
Okay.
have any
All right.
Sonny Chris records. I always, a lot of cats don't know about Sonny Chris, but he lived in Europe for a lot of years. That's why a lot of people don't know about him. But my dad was a fan of his, and that's how I found out about Sonny Chris. I would have never even known who Sonny Chris was. But when you hear his records, you go like, "Oh, this guy, he had a very special thing." And that's what I get to about. I think that those of us who've been lucky to when you hear Najee, you know Najee. You
Yes.
know that Najee sound. You know what I mean? And you hear Gerald Albright, you know that sound. That Kirk Whalen, unmistakable
Yeah.
when you hear that sound.
You too.
So,
You as well.
oh,
Yeah.
thanks,
You as
brother.
well. Yeah.
And I think that's all we can ask for if we ever to be able to get to that place. Getting back to what you were saying, that if we could ever arrive at that place in that 0.12%, then boy, we are
Yeah.
super lucky that we got to that place. And this is why I say it's important for those of us, and this is something I kind of preach a little bit, that let us not forget that in those days, if it was Gene Ammons and Sonny Stitt and Dexter Gordon, those guys used to do a lot of recordings together. So that's why I encourage my colleagues, we need to be doing more of that kind of stuff instead of just trying to do these little smooth jazz records and the cover. We need to be getting in there and so I'm trying to organize something with two of my legend colleague friends. I can't give it away right now, but I'm trying to put a concert together with three of my legend friends, so that we can pay attention to the fact that there was a reason that we all arrived on the planet at the same time like this, to make a contribution, and there's more to be done, I believe.
You know what? I like that idea because you're talking about real horn players, I'm not getting on the festivals, but you know as well as I do, they call a jazz festival. They'll have Marion Meadows, Pieces of a Dream. Then they'll have Jennifer Hudson,
Yeah,
uh, Kim. You know what I mean, and all that. It'd be like,
yeah,
where the jazz at, man? So
yeah,
what is
yeah.
going on with that? What happened to the real jazz festivals, Marion?
Well, part of it goes back to the education of America. America stopped taking its eye off the pie for, teaching the next generation what that culture was all about. The culture wasn't just about, a style of music. It was about art.
Right.
And the art is something that we took for granted, but we grew up with it. So we just like what we just said, guys like Kool and the Gang and Earth, Wind and Fire, these guys were all trained jazz
Right.
musicians who then went on to become pop artists. They had so much to contribute. They had multiple genres of music in their repertoire. And then therefore they were able to monetize that through their whole lives to be jazz players, pop, musicians. George Benson went from being, most prolific guitar player, CTI, to being one of the biggest pop artists
Right.
with Reason and Masquerade. He wasn't just some jazz guy. Everybody knows Breeze and this Masquerade. Are you kidding me?
Right.
That was a pop hit. Like Kenny G was not a jazz player, he was a pop artist.
Right.
I mean, you can call it what you want to call it if you don't like the schmaltzy Kenny G, but Kenny G became one of the biggest pop artists of all time. Pop
All the
music,
time.
you know.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
And we just kind of stopped teaching our younger generation that there was such a thing as the art of music, as there is the art of painting and there's the art of music, and there's a process to that. And
Yeah.
we were being told who Picasso was and who Beethoven was, and we were just young, and we might have been teenagers or even elementary school, and then we're like, okay, so we heard those names, and then next time we heard it, we might have been in middle school or high school, but now we've heard the name, Louis Armstrong, and then you hear, oh, Ella Fitzgerald. So how's it that we're young kids, we know these names? Now, many of our parents had these records at home, but obviously we were paying attention as well.
Right.
Then we carried that into our generation, and many of us who then became players never forgot the fact that, man, that music that came before us, that was some hard music to play. So now we got to go back and learn that music. So I got to learn body and soul. I got to learn some Coleman Hawkins and some Dexter Gordon, and I got to learn some Dizzy Gillespie and some John Coltrane. Dude, I'm not doing anything. I ain't doing nothing. These guys already played it the best. What am I doing? I'm doing nothing. So if you skip a generation and tell them that they're doing something, I'm not mad at the rappers, but what I'm mad at is that they're just mumbling now. I don't even know what you're saying. And it's not because I'm old, but like, dude, you're getting away with just mumbling. So you've thrown a whole art away and the challenge of art and the chord changes. You didn't get it right this time, but you'll get it right next time. Look how even back in the old days with 50 years of rap in 50 years ago, rappers were taking the song, but they were rapping through changes, chord
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
These guys were rapping through chord changes, and they were reciting poems, writing poems, and rapping. I got a whole lot of respect for that because that's spoken word.
Yes.
But when you just take one beat and one chord and you make your whole life based on that, it just becomes chanting.
Right.
That's just chanting. It is an art form, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But what happened to the art of the culture that already came before you? So if that's not important anymore, then here we are. And then that's what happens because those R&B artists are not being promoted like they were back in those days. So they have to come over to the jazz festivals to even get a gig. There's no Al Heyman summer fests anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Back in those days, it was Teddy Pendergrass and Anita Baker and Whitney Houston. It was
Right.
Al Heyman, and then you had the Sinbad down in the thing, and then always it was Shaka Khan and
Yeah.
all these. And now these, so then you have the neo soul. So then you have Maxwell and Jill Scott, and then eventually
Music Soul
Kim,
Child. Yeah.
Music Soul Child, and all these Angie Stones, Erica Badu, and then they go, so where do they go play? Because it's all Live Nation now. So if you're not Beyonce or Taylor Swift or Bruce Springsteen, then you're not getting on any tours because they don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Because Live Nation owns the theaters now. So you can't go into a Live Nation theater anymore because they don't even promote R&B shows. They don't make enough money off of them. They'll promote country music,
Yeah.
which is always a sellout.
Right.
But when it's New Edition and Angie Stone or Erica Badu or Gil, not that they don't have they have thousands of fans still,
Yes. Yes.
but that's thousands of fans. The other artists have hundreds, millions of
Right.
fans.
Yeah.
So when Live Nation takes Taylor Swift or Beyonce on the road, I mean, there's a night of music is millions of dollars for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
They already know how much they're gonna make. They know how much they're gonna pay Beyonce. They already know that it's a sellout. The tickets start at $500. They go up to $10,000, and they already know that. So what has happened to that middle of the road artist? They had to come over to the jazz festivals, and then the jazz festivals had to up their money because those artists still aren't cheap. I mean, if you're booking a Jill Scott or something, I would go to say that they still cost in the hundreds of thousands of dollars sometimes for Alicia Keys or somebody like that.
Wow.
They still get paid well.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
still get paid. They're not working for 25, 30, 40, $50,000 because they can still go to a festival like a Seabreeze that has, I don't know how many thousand people they get at Seabreeze, but what I'm saying is they're still going to have to pay them
yeah,
a lot of money. Like you want to get a George Benson. George Benson's going to be like a $7,500,000 act,
yeah.
because he's George Benson, and it is Charlie Wilson, who probably gets about 300,000. I'm just throwing out numbers, but I'm just
Right.
saying they're not
Yeah.
cheap.
No, no, no.
So then the jazz artists, they have to take less pay
Yeah,
so that they can afford the R&B artists.
that's
So, and
crazy,
here
isn't
we
it?
are. In answer to the question that you just asked me, here we are trying to figure out what's going on with jazz, with an audience, that's getting older, and they kind of monikered it as a smooth jazz when it was contemporary jazz, and nobody really cares when you go to the show if you saw Kim or Marion Meadows or Eric Benet or Boney James.
Right.
People just want to come see music.
Yeah, right, right.
So how do you turn that into something that, but you would definitely have needed to keep the the importance of the culture in people's minds, so that they're not just sitting there going to go to the picnic and forget about the content of the show, not just the fact that you're there to dance around on stage. But those artists have big hits,
Yeah,
and somewhere along the line, the smooth jazz artists felt as though some of them thought they were kind of prima donnas. But dude, you got to have hits like those people, because those people sell millions of records. They don't sell thousands; they sell
no,
millions. So it might be the OJ's, or it might have been Frankie Beverly was like, it might have been those bands, but you're talking about artists who sold millions of records as
right.
opposed to you, and their audience is much more vast. So when you see them do a post, when you see one of those nostalgic artists do a post, let's say if Anita Baker did a post, it would be us, it'd be a few hundred people would respond and get some likes. When they do a post, it's thousands of people
Yeah, yeah,
respond because it's Anita Baker. You know what I mean? Or it's Shaka Khan. When Shaka Khan does a post, so when she does a post and says, "I'm playing at so and so," that really means something to a promoter,
yeah,
because her likes are in the maybe 100,000 people or 50,000 people will write back and say, "Well, I'm going to be there." So that's how it works nowadays, and it's a social media world
yeah,
nowadays. If you're
yeah.
not a part of that, um, you get left behind, and we can't even work anymore without being social media, involved. We have to be involved. They expect it of you. They won't even hire you anymore unless you get down and dirty with it. And I tell you the truth, I really wish I didn't have to do it all the time, but you have to do it.
Hey, let me ask you about your 2025, man, because I know you had a whirlwind. I mean, you did the Sea Breeze and you did some other things, right? And so, how was your music year last year, man?
It was great. It was really, really good. As I said before, I took on a new agent, Mighty Music, Steve Butler, and he had me working, all over the place, and I'm grateful. But 2026 is not going to be any different. We're just coming out with a bang. We had a chance to showcase the Black Pearl Band, do the Romantica tour. Part of it, I work with Brian Simpson. I got a chance to work a lot with Althea Renee this year.
Okay.
She's coming up, and also Jesse J, and so they're all his artists as well. So
Hmm.
we're all kind of sharing in that love, and that's still out there. Uh, thank goodness. But guys, he's got good people on the right. He's got Eric Darius and Joaquin Joyner, the young guys who are doing their thing,
Right.
along with, I believe, and Alex Boone Young. He and I have worked a lot together in the
Okay.
last couple of years.
Oh,
So
Alex,
we've been with them on, yeah.
I just interviewed his drummer, Poogie Bell, couple.
Fuji's in our band.
Yes.
Fuji's the drummer in our band. Yeah, without me and Alex and my bass player, Will Gaines. It's killing.
Hey,
It's
man,
just four of us, man. It's
man, I
it's a
tell
pure New
you.
York.
This world is so small when you think about it. You guys all be knowing each other. It's just like a big circle here, man. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, no doubt, no
And
doubt.
it's
Fuji
it's
is like,
beautiful, man.
I tell people all the time. Fuji Bell's probably right now the most recorded living drummer right now.
Is
on
that
more
right?
records. Oh
Oh,
yeah, him and Bernard Purdy
yeah, yeah.
have been on more
Bernard
records
Purdy,
than
Purdy,
yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Those two guys have been on more records than any other drummers worldwide. Yeah, no
And
doubt.
Tony Moore is a good one. You know Tony Moore?
Of course,
Yeah,
of course.
Tony. Now I know he
Tony
was
did
sick.
many of my tours together. I did the Michael Langton, Paul Taylor tour. We did the gentleman. We did Gentleman on Night. Then we did with Warren Hill years ago, and Tony was a drummer in a couple of those tours.
It's funny. He used to play with a guy named Jeff Gonzalez, a soprano sax player,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
he's played this Japanese restaurant in Huntington Beach, and that's where I met Tony at. And then I would
Really?
see him. Yeah,
Okay.
I would see him everywhere. He would come down there on the weekend. Then you see him playing with Patty Austin, or maybe you at the Newport Jazz Festival. You know, just all
Yeah.
over, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. He's a work. He worked a lot, and I know he had a little health scare last year, so I
yeah.
think
That's
he's
why I
doing
was wondering.
much
Have you
better.
heard any? Is he okay now?
Yeah, I heard he's doing much better now.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
that's what I
glad to
heard.
hear that, man.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I saw him. I said, man, you look you kind of, lost a lot of weight. And they said that he had a little health scare, but
Yeah,
they had to get some things checked out.
yeah.
But
I'm glad he's okay now, man. That's
me
good.
too. Me
I
too.
tell
He's a
you
good
what,
guy.
man. Yeah, it's a trip though, man. And you guys work together now. Is there some hating going on here and there, this and that and other? You ever experienced that? The artist sax players hating on each other. You ain't got to name no names, but
No,
you know.
no, no. We kid each other,
You
so it's
do?
probably more
Okay.
envy. It's probably more envy. I don't think there's any hate.
Okay.
At the end of the day, we all love each other. We love what we all accomplished. But is there envy? Oh yeah, hell yeah. Some guy goes like, I wish I could get the kind of money he's making.
Exactly.
And do we kid about one another? Sure.
Yeah.
They kid me about my tight pants, and we'll kid Brian Culberson for jumping around on stage, and Boney James for wearing the same old hat. But that's just
Yeah.
that's the part because it's a mutual love and respect for one another at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, there's always going to be some behind door envy, but healthy wise. But I guarantee you that if I got a call from any of those guys that needed me, I'm there. As likewise,
Right.
if Joe Albright calls me and says, Marion, I need you, and Jeff Koshwa called me and said he needed me for the sax pack because Steve's dad was sick at the time, and I said I'm there, because
Yeah.
that's what we do. That's what
Yeah.
we do.
I
It's a
know
real,
him.
it's a good community,
I know Jeff too. I know Jeff Kaushawat too, though. Yeah.
Great, great. That's a great musician right
Yeah.
there. That
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
Oh, he's a beast.
You know Rob
And people don't
Mullins?
know,
Remember Rob
huh?
Mullins? Rob
Yeah,
Mullins?
sure. Yeah,
I
sure.
ain't
I
heard
know
from him
Rob.
in a while, but yeah, he used to be down at that
Yeah.
club too, man. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't, I only used to kind of sit in at Spaghettini's when we do the NAMM shows and stuff.
Uh-huh.
I played a couple of times, because I don't think we ever did any of my big tour gigs at Spaghettini's because they didn't pay us enough, for the tour
Right.
shows.
Right.
So when you do a tour show, it's going to be at like the Hyatt Newporter,
Right.
and Spaghettini's can't pay that kind of money.
Right.
But most of the guys that get a chance to go down there, Michael and those guys on a given night, and then if it's a special occasion, and Cannonball used to rent out Spaghettini's. So these last couple of years are the only first time I ever played there is Marion Meadows. That was the first time.
That's
Last year was
okay.
my first time. Yeah, that was my first time. The time you saw me was, I think, my third or fourth time
Yeah,
playing
because
there.
I've seen you there twice. That's my second time
Yeah,
seeing you there. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And so I might have only played there three times. I've not as Marion Meadows band,
Okay.
but I just had never really played there. There's quite a few spots that I hadn't played because they got so many musicians that live out there
Right.
that it's hard for them to fly an East Coast guy,
Right. Right. Right.
and guys like me and Kim Waters and
Are you an
all
East
and
Coast now?
Alex Quinn. Yeah, I don't know where Kim. I think Kim's back. I
No, I'm
think
talking
he's
about
back in
yourself.
Atlanta.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm back on the East Coast. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
I'm back in I'm back. We're back in Connecticut, around New York, back in the New York area
You
now.
were in Phoenix for a while, weren't you? For a
Yeah, I
long
was.
while. Yeah.
Yeah, like 12 years. Yeah,
I actually met you.
and
I
so I'm
met
back.
you at the Newport some years ago when you were living in Phoenix.
Oh yeah, and I did
Yeah.
a few years in Nashville, and then we went back to New York, and now we're out in Connecticut, between New York and Connecticut. It's the same, 45 minutes away. I'm just the East Coast. I like the East Coast,
I
but right
understand.
now might have to hide out. I don't know. We got stuff. I might have to hide out, you know.
Woo!
I've been in Hawaii too long, man. I might be looking a little
Nah,
like they might stop me. I got some sun on my face, you
what
know.
part? What part of Hawaii you were? You were?
We're in Maui.
Oh, you're in
Yeah,
Maui. Okay, yeah.
up on the Haleakala, so we're up on the mountain, and it's beautiful up here. It's nice.
I used to live
It's
on
nice.
Oahu, man. I tell you all these parallels here, man. You know, I was in the
I know
military,
that's crazy. So
and
you
I
already
got
know the
out.
drill.
I got out, and I stayed there for 3 more years. You know.
Where were you in the army?
Yeah,
Where were you
I
in?
was stationed at
Uh,
Schofield Barracks,
sure,
the
sure.
the worst barracks on the
Sure.
island.
I was just saying that, you know, a lot of guys, just to my girl, I said, you know, so many of the military people, when they get out, they stay
Yeah,
in Hawaii.
that's
A
what I
lot of them
did.
have,
You know. Yeah.
grandfathered into Oahu because, man, you can't buy property over here anymore.
No, no,
Woo!
yeah. You can't get the lease because the lease you get a 99-year lease on the property or something like that, right? Because you don't you get the
Well,
land, right?
yeah, that you could buy it now, but they had a lottery for if you were part Hawaiian for those who were part of Hawaiian. There was a lottery from when the Queen was still alive back in the day
Okay.
that you could get the land for like $2 or something. That doesn't exist anymore. But what you can't do anymore is you can't bring those Airbnbs and stuff anymore, at least to Maui, because since we had the fire over in Lahaina,
Uh-huh.
they're trying to protect the people that live
Right,
here, at least so they have a place to live and people don't come over and just take up all the
right.
places. You know, there's only so much water on these islands, you know,
Yeah,
as you well know. So, but it's still nice to be here, and we're
yeah.
enjoying it. So I always take that break after the winter break from touring, get over here and reset again, and in a few weeks we'll be heading back and get it going again.
Right. Hey, Marion, so you played so many venues all over the world, man. Give me some of the best venues that you've played that were just like you were just like or just one that you just say, this is heaven, you know.
Well, I certainly I can say for sure that all the Fox theaters around the country and the ones that are still around, I think there's only three left: Atlanta, St. Louis, and Detroit. But there used to be many more. I'm going to tell you that anytime you ever got a chance to play at a Fox theater, it's one of the most beautiful theaters that you could possibly ever play at. That's for sure. I've done many shows over the years in different configurations, and one in particular, I was in Detroit. It was Anita Baker and Incognito. It was huge. It was, you know, it was a huge show,
Hmm.
and it was a magical night at the Fox Theater just to be there. And the other place I played, Hollywood Bowl, amazing. The Greek Theater is another
I
great
love the
place to
Greek
play.
and the
Great.
bowl. Yes, yes.
Yeah, so the Greek and the Bowl are iconic. And then years ago I played in the Megaron Opera Hall in Greece with my good friend Brian Keane and a Turkish artist by the name of Farouk Takblik and Omar Farouk Takblik. And it was for a East meets West kind of. He's a Eastern player from Turkey that plays like the ney, baklava. He plays all of these traditional Turkish instruments. Also very good friends with Artur Tunç Bayarcan, who used to play with David Sanborn. So this music was a kind of a mixture of Turkish and Western jazz. And this Megaron Opera Hall in Greece was probably the most amazing place I've ever played in. And it's
Okay.
outdoors with these baffles that come down and they can change the sound based on the atmospheres of that particular night. And, you know, just, and I played some beautiful venues around the world, but that's probably probably the most iconic.
How did you like touring? You know, now that I mean, okay, versus when you first started out when you was with Norman Connors and doing all of that, versus now, how do you? What's the difference in touring now versus back then?
Well, I mean, I always love touring. I just, you know, I kind of get a little disenfranchised with the too much tracking by the artists. Artists are tracking and tracking and tracking, you know, as opposed to this is an audience that grew up listening to live music. So they didn't necessarily need to be trained to some track music, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? So that's disappointing to me that the artists are deciding that they need to put a track to everything. You know, I'm not opposed to the tracks, but it's our generation never really cared if you had a track. We cared that you played. We didn't care if it was perfect
right.
from the record. but a lot of times it was perfect because of the artists were so good
Yeah.
from that generation. So when if are you replacing the tracking for a lack of being a great player and putting in the work, or are you just enhancing the sound? Because like I said, this generation doesn't really care if you have a track in the background.
Right.
You
Yeah.
just hire a guitar player. So I love touring. Don't get me wrong. I'm still very happy and very happy to be able to tour. I love playing for out in public. Absolutely. But I have other hobbies and things that I like to do as well. So, we want to start traveling more. So I want to take some time, kind of pick and choose those shows so that my audience doesn't get worn out on every little place all the time.
Right.
I fear that that happens, that then you get to the festivals and the people are not, you know, not that it's their fault, but they'll get to the festivals and they're more picnicking than they are listening
Yeah.
to the music,
Right.
you know,
Right.
which is fine if that's what it's there
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
But that's not what it was like when we played the Hollywood Bowl. People were picnicking, but they were there to see the music. I
Yeah.
don't need to tell you that. So the people were paying attention and listening, and also coming up playing with Norman Carnes. I know that all those festivals I did with him, that was a very educated audience listening to the music. So, you know, I'm gonna keep on doing it and still having fun. I'm not going nowhere anytime soon.
You got a new project you working on? Any new
Working on it right now. Yeah,
okay.
I'm tweaking away at stuff right now. So number 18's coming.
All right.
We just penned the deal for that, and it's going to be out fairly quick. This one. This one will be out by this summer for sure.
Okay. All
So
right.
it won't be a year from now. So they want another one to come out pretty soon. So I had the Just Doing Me and the AI Moonrise on from the last album, and then I had Wiley Morris. I had Ronnie Psalm producing on that, and also Chris Big Dog Davis. You see his
Yeah,
name all
he's
over.
he's a bad man. Him and that other,
Yeah.
another name I hear all the time, and I think I heard from you when you and I spoke. Adam Howley.
Yeah, Adam, I just did a song for Adam Hawley.
Yeah, yeah,
I just recorded a song for him, and I had a song today that I'm working on, and he owes me a favor, so I'm gonna call him. He's gonna
yeah,
play guitar on
yeah.
this song that I'm working on. I have a version of uh, oh man, uh, it was the Stephanie Mills song. Uh, oh man, let's see. Hold on, I can't even play it for you. Uh, Da 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 dee da da da. What's that song? Da dee da 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 da.
Oh yeah,
I
I
would
know what you're
never
talking about. Yeah, yeah. But oh
do
man, I can't
love.
think
I
of
never
it.
knew love like this
Oh yeah,
before.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, you doing that?
Man,
Okay.
I've already recorded. I recorded it last year. I didn't
Okay.
put it on the record last year because they kind of like put it on hold, and then this year I said I'm putting it on. I'm gonna send it to you.
Okay.
You tell me what you think. You tell
All
me.
right.
I'm gonna send. I'm gonna. Right when we get off, I'm gonna send you a copy of it.
Okay.
So you tell me what you think. Yeah.
Do that. I had to ask you, man. My favorite song of yours ever. I play it every day, no lie. Wishing on a Star, man. What made you figure do that as a cover, man?
It's funny because the guy that produced that, Wiley Morris from the SOS band, is the guy that wrote the hit tracks on Just Doing Me. We're back working together again. That was his track that he had actually done for a gospel version of Wishing on a Star.
Oh,
And he goes, man, I got this because he produces all the gospel singers,
okay.
and he comes from gospel in Atlanta, and he also does, he came from the SOS band. So when he sent me that track, I go, man, I got to do because he said I got this version of Wishing on a Star,
Yeah.
and I thought it was like the regular, you
Right.
wishing on it,
Yeah,
man,
yeah.
but he had that beat on it, and that was it. He didn't. I didn't even get 3 bars into the song. I said, yeah, I want that,
Ah,
and we started putting it all together. So yeah,
I like
but
the way
yeah, man,
you remixed it too. I like the way you did the remix on it.
yeah, we did a remix on
Yeah,
it.
yeah. I like that too, man. That's good stuff,
Yeah,
man.
man. Yeah, brother. Well, thank you for having me,
Hey,
man.
man,
Shoot,
Marion, I tell
and
you, bro, you and I, man, we could go all night, brother. But you know what? I
we
really
can, we
appreciate
can.
I appreciate you,
Well, we'll
brother.
do part two, brother.
You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
we'll do part two. We'll get into some of that history stuff, and we'll do a session where we'll talk about some of these older artists, and we'll get into that. And I think that's important. If you have a podcast like you do, I don't mind getting in there, getting a little more serious
Yeah.
about, because your listeners are obviously from our generation,
Yeah.
and so they every chance they get when they hear what we have to say about things that are important, it's important to say them. So
Right.
let's
Right.
uh let's get into that next time.
Before you go, Mary, would you have any advice for artists trying to come up now, get in the game? Any advice for them?
Okay, so I would say that right now it's all about your self-sustainability, which would be putting your own website together, doing your own recording, getting with people who that you can record with. And you can do all of those things on a budget. You don't really need to go out and there are these producers that'll come along and say, hey, you spend thousands of dollars. You can do these things if you're an up and coming artist and you have those skills. Now, if you don't have those skills, then you would want to get with some of the people that you can reach out to artists. I know that most of us are approachable through our social media, and
Yes.
and we're more than willing to give advice for sure. It's a little harder time because we don't make records anymore.
Right.
But that's not to say that you can't have a career. I mean, there's this guy, Augie Bello from New York City, and the guy that
Yeah,
Leo
I've heard
P.
him. Yes. Yeah.
and Leo P, who now does the Dave Cos tours. Those
Right.
guys started out, these are guys, street guys.
Yes.
Now they have careers because they got these big social media platforms,
Yes.
and they've got thousands of followers. In many cases, they have even more followers than some of the smooth jazz people.
Yes.
So, so if you know how to get to that, and that you put in the work to get it done, and you don't need to make the whole album anymore. You can make suites of music. So you can do the whole album, 10 songs, but you can also do 5 songs and get it out to your people. And do it, obviously got to use all the tools you can. But as far as finding producers, many of us know, people. And if you have even personally have some people who are trying to do some work, you can reach out to me because I've got producers in LA, I got producers in New York, and they're all the kind of guys that you would want to get around. Not these fake guys, You want to go with the real people.
All right, that's good information, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
So, but
now
I hate to say it, but it's all about that social media
it
now.
is. It
You
is.
know,
Yeah, you're right.
and
You don't have to make a record and you can have millions of followers. You don't have to make a record.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you can just play online. Like I said, this guy Agubello and Leo P. Leo P. does the dance down the subway with the baritone sax. This dude's taking off now.
Yeah, he is.
And
Come on,
Grace
kid.
Kelly, she does that. Grace Kelly does that. She does that well with her social media as well. So she's not always all the way invested in the smooth jazz. She does her own little thing anyway. But anyway,
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you go, brother.
All right, man.
Next time.
Okay,
Okay.
brother. And this is gonna air on Saturday, okay? All right, man.
Please send me the link and everything.
Will
Thanks,
do.
Dave.
All right.
Okay.
Take care.
Appreciate
All
you,
right.
man.
Ladies and
Okay.
gentlemen,
Bye
that's
bye
Mr.
now.
Marion Meadows. Thank you guys for joining me on Saxophonist. You guys take care.